biggest headline today, which I do not understand why the rest of the Indian media has missed, is that the war is on our doorstep. Forget what is happening around the Strait of Hormuz. The war is right here and very, very close to us. Do not be shocked, ladies and gentlemen, at what I am about to share next. The war between Iran and America is being fought 300 kilometers from Kanyakumari. Yes, you heard that right. 373 kilometers to be precise from Kanyakumari, very close to Indian territorial waters, just on the edge of Sri Lanka's territorial waters, in a location that is just 70 kilometers from Galle, G-A-L-L-E, Galle, the Sri Lankan port. 40 nautical miles, 70 kilometers from Galle, very close to us. An American submarine has carried out a torpedo attack, silently moving close to India's waters. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the visuals of that attack. And an Iranian ship called IRIS Dena, which was, by the way, returning to Iran after participating in a multinational naval exercise that India was hosting in Visakhapatnam called Milan 2026. In fact, we have the visuals. This is the ship when it was participating in the Milan 2026 multinational naval exercises in Visakhapatnam. It was on its way back to Iran, possibly for deployment. These are the pictures of the Iranian crew members on board the Iris Dena when they were at Visakhapatnam. Now, this ship was going back from Visakhapatnam past the coast of, southern coast of Sri Lanka and probably going back to the Middle East. And it is there, obviously being tracked by the Americans, that it was torpedoed by an American submarine. And ladies and gentlemen, the ship was en route back to Iran from the eastern Indian port of Visakhapatnam at the time of the attack. Ladies and gentlemen, the big story you need to hear tonight is that very close to our coast, the Americans have attacked and sunk an Iranian warship. The US military has released visuals of the attack, and I can only tell you the significance of this attack is in the fact that, as per the US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, he says this is the first torpedo sinking of an enemy warship since World War II. I cannot underscore more how significant this event has been, because, ladies and gentlemen, the Sri Lankan Navy, the Sri Lankan Air Force are deploying ships, and as of now I know that there are 30 to 35 sailors rescued, but unfortunately more than 100 are missing, presumed dead, and the ship is on the bottom of the ocean. Ladies and gentlemen, America and Israel's war with Iran is now being fought 300 kilometers from our coast. I've always been saying, and I've said this over the last few days, and some of you have said that I've been exaggerating things. Well, I don't. Whenever I make a point on issues such as this, as serious as this, which involves our national security as well, I say this on the basis of information which I have. Ladies and gentlemen, this is World War III, have no doubt about it. More and more countries are getting involved. The discussions are becoming hotter. And ladies and gentlemen, when this war reaches 300 kilometers from our coastline, we should be clear, we can no longer really be non-aligned about this. Maybe we can, maybe that is an estimation of the government, but there's going to be a heavy contestation for our waters. We must also remember, and yesterday we had the privilege of hosting the Indian Navy admirals at a big event, but the Indian Ocean is our zone of influence. The Indian Ocean is our zone of influence. And in the Indian Ocean, 300 kilometers from Kanyakumari, when an American submarine sinks an Iranian warship returning from a multilateral exercise hosted by the Republic of India, in international waters, in our zone of influence, when the Americans torpedo an Iranian warship, we must start getting very watchful. I'm sure our government is. But at this point of time, viewers, we'll have to be very alert. Of course, this is not in our territorial waters. It's not in Sri Lanka's territorial waters either, but it's just on the edge. The biggest torpedo attack by an American submarine since World War II has happened 300 kilometers, 373 kilometers, to be precise, ladies and gentlemen, from Kanyakumari. We cannot ignore this. This is our strategic sphere. A US submarine operating so close to Indian shores without any coordination, without, I repeat, any coordination with our Navy, with our armed forces, with us, is an indirect challenge to our influence. Of course, this escalates this entire battle into our direct neighborhood. We have so far maintained ties with both Washington and Tehran. We have the Chabahar port. We've invested over $500 billion into that port, so we are being forced to make a choice. Sri Lanka is also caught in the middle. The casualties of the war are in Galle. Ladies and gentlemen, Colombo now faces pressure from Washington, Tehran, Beijing, and of course from Delhi simultaneously. Remember, this is not an isolated incident. This is also a reflection of the way America thinks. It will go right next to our territorial waters if required to achieve its military objectives. Sri Lanka and, in a way, India are now a front row witness to American power projection right next to our coast, in the Sri Lankan backyard. Without Sri Lankan involvement, knowledge, consent, or warning, the Americans are doing what they feel they need to. Dear viewers of Republic, I would like to state again that this ship was India's guest. The ship, I'll show it again, IRIS Dana, was India's guest, and the US sank it 370 kilometers from Kanyakumari. Viewers across Republic, think about this. The ship was literally sailing home from our waters where it was our guest when the US torpedoed it. Of course, it was international waters, but incidents like this are far-reaching. They should make us think. What are the lines? And more importantly, for us, for Bharat, a proud nation, what are the red lines the nation needs to know?